Good afternoon to one and all. I'm Rajas Purandare, researcher at Indic Researchers Forum. Indic Researchers Forum is a Delhi NCR-based research and policy think tank focused on strategic affairs, national security, and foreign policy through a civilization perspective. Today, as we gather here for this crucial India-Afghanistan dialogue, we do so in the shadow of barbaric Pakistani airstrikes in eastern Afghanistan provinces of Nangarhar and Paktika, killing innocent civilians, including women and children. Indic Researchers Forum, through this dialogue, express our deepest condolences to the innocent civilians of Afghanistan and pay tribute to the countless victims of state sponsored terrorism in the region. India and Afghanistan share deep historical, cultural, and civilizational ties underpinned by centuries of exchanges in trade, knowledge, and people to people connections. Since Taliban's return to power in August of 2021, bilateral relations between both the countries have evolved from a period of cautious distance marked primarily by humanitarian assistance to a more structured diplomatic and constructive engagement. Key developments include high-level visits such as Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi's visit to India in 2025, India's decision to reopen its embassy in Kabul, and mutual reaffirmation of respect for each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. At the same time, Afghanistan's security challenge remains existential. The country continues to grapple with internal insurgencies, the presence of Islamic State Khorasan province, ethnic and sectarian fault lines, and severe economic distress that undermines governance and social cohesion. The absence of international recognition and sustained sanctions have constrained the Taliban administration's ability to deliver security and basic services uniformly across the country. This fragile internal environment risks turning Afghanistan into a battleground of various competing militant groups and external actors, further eroding states' authority and endangering civilian security. A shared concern for both India and Afghanistan is Pakistan's role in regional instability. India views Pakistan's military establishment as the principal sponsor of cross border terrorism, while Afghanistan has historically accused Pakistan of harboring, supporting, and institutionalizing militant groups to retain strategic influence. Continued violence alongside Afghanistan-Pakistan border, disputes over the Durand Line, and the persecution of Afghan refugees and Pashtun populations in Pakistan have compounded mistrust. These dynamics not only destabilize Afghanistan internally, but also constrain India's ability to engage Afghanistan through conventional regional connectivity and security frameworks. It is against this backdrop the Indic Researchers Forum today is organizing the India-Afghanistan Security Dialogue, seeking to provide a structured platform for informed, pragmatic, and forward-looking discussions on evolving security, political, and geopolitical dynamics shaping Afghanistan and its implication for India and the wider region. Convened at a time of profound regional flux, this dialogue aims to bring together policymakers, strategic experts, academics, and practitioners to examine emerging challenges and explore avenues for constructive engagement that contribute to regional stability, human security, and long-term peace. With this, I have honor to introduce our inaugural speaker, Shri M.J. Akbar. Shri M.J. Akbar is an Indian journalist and politician who served as a Minister of State for External Affairs. He is a former member of Parliament in the Rajya Sabha and was inducted into the Union Council of Ministers by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He is also a veteran Indian journalist and author of several books, including a biography of Jawaharlal Nehru titled Nehru, The Making of India, a book on Kashmir titled Kashmir Behind the Veil, Riot After Riot, and India, The Siege Within. He also authored The Shade of Swords, A History of Jihad, and Gandhi, A Life in Three Campaigns. His book, Tinderbox, The Past and Future of Pakistan, discusses the themes of identity crisis, and class struggles in Pakistan. His latest book, After Me, Chaos, Astrology in Mughal Empire, was released in 2025. I would now request Sri M.J. Akbar sir to deliver the inaugural address. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rajas, and thank you all. And I feel privileged to opening a conference on the most important element, I think, of our bilateral relationship. It happens that as we sit here and discuss this critical issue, events have thrown a very sharp focus on the most important element of our discussions. There is much to discuss, and I'm sure there will be a great number of people who will bring their knowledge, wisdom, their understanding, their analysis into the search for a common understanding. I would like to focus on a subject which I do believe is not properly understood, which is the meaning of Afghan nationalism. And unless people understand what Afghan nationalism is and how it has been deliberately, I would say, challenged, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, by the idea of Pakistan and then by those who have managed Pakistan in the last 7.5 decades, we will not be able to fully understand the dimensions of the regional strategic crisis, what our role of India and Afghanistan should be, and why we live on a particular trajectory despite a vast number of difference in governments, both in Kabul and in Delhi. I may be pardoned, but I see a very focal point of this. The nationalism of Afghanistan has a very interesting beginning. And while it is, I suppose, conventional to see the beginning in the Durand Line created in the 1890s, I would not waste your time by going through the obvious and something which is part of conventional history and understanding. Instead, let us try and see what happened in 1918 at the end of the First World War. Something happened whose repercussions are part of our knowledge, but whose origins are not. In 1918, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, every single Muslim region in the world, I say Muslim, I don't believe there is an Islamic region, because Islam belongs to the universe. Islam belongs to the people. Islam belongs to the inner faith. Islam doesn't have a geography. Every single Muslim political space, if that is how you want to define the age before the age of nation states, which is the age of empires, every single Muslim space was colonized by Europe after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And I include Turkey, because until Mustafa Kemal restored Turkey's independence, Turkey also was basically in effect subjugated by England and France. That was a kind of almost an existential shock to Muslims who had grown used to the idea of being not only living in independent space, but also being masters of their domain. It was this event which actually led to what is now known as the Khilafat movement. I mean, people don't understand why Indian Muslims should worry about the fall of the Ottoman Empire, something that is also not particularly logical. In fact, many Muslims raise this point, but this emerged out of a sense of foreboding, a sense of defeat, a sense of depression, that the very existence of Islam would be threatened by the presence of colonialism everywhere. And that is why from this emerged the slogan, Islam is in danger. But this is not really the subject. The most important aspect of this, what I have suggested to you, that the only Muslim space in the geography of the Muslim world was, I'm sorry, the only space which preserved its independence was actually Afghanistan. It was under pressure. It had been under pressure for the previous 50, 60 years through the wars launched by the British to seize Afghanistan. The British wanted Afghanistan desperately. Three major wars. And despite that, even the people forget that in 1918, there was the third Afghan war. And Kabul did not fall. Yes, the British used the Air Force, but Kabul did not fall. It may have had to compromise. It may have to do it, but it did not. And indeed, one of the supplementary slogans of the Khilafat movement on the Indian subcontinent was that, if we are not permitted legitimate space within the British Empire, then we should all take, then Indian Muslims should go to Afghanistan for their salvation, as it were. And in fact, it was very interesting that the Afghans immediately told them to go back and said this was a country for Afghans. It was not a country for immigrants. And they did have to come back. But the belief in the state as a civilizational place, this is at the heart of this. The struggle is between a civilizational state versus an artificial state. Pakistan was created as an artificial state because there is no record in history of Islam being the basis of nationalism. And if the nation state was going to be the building block of international stability after 1918, which is after the fall of this age of empires, then obviously nationalism came to play. Islam, I want to cut a long story short. If Islam had been sufficient as a basis of nationalism, why would there be 23 Arab countries? So that argument was a false argument imposed upon India by a combination of people who never believed in India's freedom, namely the Muslim League, and the British, who used them as pawns very effectively. But to get back to 1947 and the creation of Pakistan, this war that we are talking about, from the very beginning, the Afghan people and the Afghan government, once again, like us, Afghan has seen so many governments. We have seen royalty, we have seen pro-Soviet Union leftist governments, and so on and so forth. Everybody in this room knows the number of governments that preceded and now have ended up as the second Taliban government with different ideologies, different doctrines. But when it came to Afghan nationalism, they have all been united in defense of the civilizational state of Afghanistan, of the people of Afghanistan. Right? Other differences may remain where they are, but on this they have been united. In 1948, which is the first test, right? Afghanistan voted against Pakistan joining the United Nations because it wanted an independent Pakhtunistan. That was the message of Ghaffar Khan, Badshah Khan at that moment. Why? Because the Durand Line, what did it do? The Durand Line basically stole Peshawar, stole Swat, stole Chitral from Afghanistan. So this is not even something that goes very far back in history. It's a very recent phenomenon given the measurements of history. It's only the British artificial Durand Line which stole these regions away uh, from Afghanistan and turned them into principal cities of an artificial state uh, called Pakistan. So uh, indeed, you think of this present conflict as something that has emerged with a recent history. No. In 1949, Pakistan attacked Afghanistan. So this conflict with Afghanistan is may not have got the headlines that Pakistan's attack on Kashmir generated, but it is almost as old. It's 1949. Right? In 1950, there was an Afghan retaliation. Of course, international dynamics moved ahead. The superpowers got involved in the region, and once the Americans became steadfast allies of Pakistan by 1954, which was when the military alliance and treaty was signed, inevitably at some point the Russians had to respond, and the Soviets did respond in 1960 with the Russian-Afghan treaty. We know the story of the 1970s. We know the story of the 1980s. Right? We have to move in by the demands of the time available to us to the 1990s. And when Pakistan tried to resolve the question of nationalism and conflate nationalism with Islam, as was existing in their country. But they thought that this conflation, that has been the standard Pakistan line, that this conflation would actually dilute Afghan nationalism. That was the strategic purpose. And by the dilution of Afghan nationalism, it would serve as an adjunct to Pakistan's strategic interests, basically an alliance with Afghanistan against India. In real terms, this would what the practical implications would be. And in this respect, the creation of Taliban, which was Talib means students, of madrasa students leading a movement by 1996, and their success against a regime which had begun to totter very badly. Benazir Bhutto, who was Prime Minister of Pakistan at the time, described the Taliban, then led by Mullah Omar, as her children. And then Pakistan discovered that even Mullah Omar's Taliban never accepted the Durand Line. And here we can see the civilizational strength of the Afghanistan state standing up firmly, and that came as the Pakistanis treated that response as a betrayal. Very major events overtook the region. I mean, after Musharraf went over to the Americans after 9/11 and joined the American invasion of Afghanistan, we saw the installation or the creation of Hamid Karzai's government. And at that moment, at least, Pakistan thought that American pressure, American presence in Afghanistan would help it actually consolidate its claim over the Durand Line as the border. Musharraf proposed fencing, which would be agreed upon by both sides, therefore demarcation. Karzai warned him that, if I remember the phrase correctly, that it would be a different ball game this time. Even as you know, in July 2003, there was a border clash when Pakistan moved its border at the Yaqubi Pass, some 600 meters. There's always, Afghanistan has always protected. uh, in June 2011, they were shooting outbursts and bouts in Nuristan, Nangarhar Post. This was then uh, amplified by the nurture by Pakistan of giving sanctuary by Pakistan of terrorist elements, right? And of course, most of these terrorist elements were used against India. I remember Hillary Clinton's famous remark uh, discussing Pakistan's use of terrorists against India, that, if you nurture a snake, why should you be surprised if the snake bites you along with the neighbor? The When over a course of time, move to 2021, when eventually the Americans left arbitrarily and very suddenly, as seems to be a practice. Uh, Imran Khan, who was then Prime Minister of Pakistan, uh, said publicly that when the Taliban came back to power, that the Taliban had broken the shackles of slavery. And Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid told a press conference at a luxury hotel, the only luxury hotel in Kabul, that don't worry, everything will be okay. He was reassuring the West that Pakistan would, now that Taliban had come back, Pakistan would be able to effectively have control over what the Taliban did. Because, once again, it is the Quetta, which was the headquarters originally. It was the Quetta Shura, which had sponsored, but along with it, there were other forces like Sirajuddin Haqqani and so on, but all living in Pakistan, and they went and founded and created the new Pakistan government. Pakistan thought that this time definitely Afghanistan would become an adjunct state in strategic terms, and it would be subservient to Pakistan's strategic needs. Again, the cover was, as I said, the conflation of Islam, and that is why you have these curious statements made by Pakistani ministers that telling Afghanistan, you can't start a war against us because of Sharia. I mean, to teach the Taliban Sharia must be a kind of shocking paradox, but this is what the kind of silliness that we heard publicly. What the Afghans have understood across differences is that Pakistan is a jelly state. What is a jelly state? Butter will melt in the heat and disappear. Jelly will not. But jelly will always be unstable. Right? And if you have terrorism as your policy and nuclear, then you'll become a toxic nuclear state. Pakistan is not a civilizational state. I mean, it's quite obvious. Any country which lives on the Indus and does not recognize Mohenjo-daro or Harappa or Gandhara as part of its civilization is not a civilizational state. Right? The instability of Pakistan is inherent in its origins and continues when will destabilize the region. The present provocation lies, in my view, in the new confidence that Pakistan has suddenly discovered, or Pakistan's military regime has discovered, Pakistan's supreme and permanent ruling power. The military has discovered under a man, Asim Munir, who has again exploited Islam for political ends. But he, because I think of a one-to-one dinner with Donald Trump, which again is unprecedented in terms of protocol, and because of the constant phrases of congratulations he receives from some elements in the West, I think this confidence has persuaded the Pakistani army to believe that it can subjugate Afghanistan. It can use provocations to basically uh, launch war against the Afghan state and impose its will. Its excuse this time is the Tehreek-e-Taliban, um, which it says, but the Tehreek emerges out of the instability within Pakistan and of people who say that if Islamism is going to be the doctrine of the origin, then further degrees of Islamism must become the doctrine of governance as well. That's a separate argument, right? And the Taliban is interested, really, it will preserve its own form of Islamic governance. There's no doubt about that. But it will never, I believe, compromise on something fundamental, which is Afghan nationalism. And this is something that Pakistan is once again learning. On paper and on the ground, when you compare the size of the two forces, you will look at the fact that Pakistan has more than 600,000 active troops within its army, that Pakistan has more than 6,000 armored vehicles in its infantry, that it has 400 combat aircraft, some which are being used at this moment to combat, to bomb Kabul and Kandahar. And Taliban has, in comparison, only about 170,000 troops in army. But remember one thing, Afghanistan has two advantages. One, it is fighting for its independence, which becomes a huge multiplier in motivation. Number two, it is fighting on only one front. Pakistan has now created three fronts: Balochistan, Kashmir, of course, and now Afghanistan. It is Pakistan which is surrounded by war, not Afghanistan. Afghanistan has perfectly good, equable relations with Iran. In this context, the security dialogue between India and Afghanistan, and indeed a much larger dialogue between India and Afghanistan, a much greater relationship between India and Afghanistan, is not only understandable, but I would say imperative. And I think the stability of the region will owe a great deal to how important and how successful a bridge that is built between Delhi and Kabul. We have used innovations in our relationship when Pakistan for long years has blocked road transport in order to, in order to disrupt trade between the two countries. But Prime Minister Modi used a very innovative form of using the air as a corridor for trade. And it was very successful until it was disrupted again. But there are many means of going through. I think we did one of the first things we did when the arrival of the Taliban government was not fall prey to the conventional wisdom or to Pakistan's propaganda of believing that in the second Taliban government, Pakistan had also lost its independence. We first reached out with humanitarian aid, which was extremely welcome. If I'm not mistaken, there were wheat supplies. This broke the ice. This helped remove or lessen misunderstandings. It created confidence. It takes time. And we again did not do it at the cost of helping those Afghans who had taken refuge in Delhi. They still get refuge in Delhi. We have made this clear that as a nation, we do not abandon friends. We give them humanitarian protection, but that's all. And I think it is very mature of the Taliban particularly the level of their visits has risen to the extent of the foreign minister Mutaki coming in, His Excellency Mutaki coming in for a visit here. Just we understand that their understanding of their form of government deserves to be respected. It is not important to agree with one another in order to respect each other. And this stage of the relationship, I think, is extremely important because it builds the plateau, the base for taking the relationship. I think now, after the outbreak of what the Pakistanis have described as open war. In fact, the defense minister might have used better or more cultivated phrases, but I think he described it as damadam maskalandar, right? But given the nature of the present conflict, it is important that we consolidate what has been achieved in the last 2 years and take the relationship forward, and also begin to inform the world of the true nature of this conflict. That the Pakistani narrative is not only deeply flawed in doctrine, but it is a doctrine of aggression, a doctrine of what I would call colonization of Afghanistan in the name of faith. And this is not going to be acceptable to either the Afghan people or indeed to any rational people, any rational nation, any rational people in the region, and hopefully across the world. It's very opportune that you have this dialogue at this moment, and I am absolutely sure that the discussions forward will lead to greater illumination of the truths about the present situation, and also this illumination will help both nations find the roadmap for a common horizon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an enlightened start to the dialogue. The words of wisdom has indeed set the tone for our dialogue. With this, I now move on to our distinguished speaker, Mr. Mohammad Masoom Stanekzai. Mohammad Masoom Stanekzai is a former chief peace negotiator of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. He previously served as a chief of National Directorate of Security, acting Minister of Defense, Minister of Telecommunications, and head of Joint Secretariat of the High Peace Council. He also worked on DDR and DIAG initiatives and was an early member of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. With over 35 years of experience in security, development, international relations, and humanitarian affairs, he holds master's degrees from University of Cambridge and Princeton University, and is a graduate of Kabul Telecom Institute and Kabul Military University. Currently, he serves as an honorary fellow at the Asian Institute, Faculty of Art, Melbourne University. I would now request Mr. Stanekzai to deliver.
Uh, Thank you very much. It is a privilege to be invited to this important dialogue, and listening to Akbar sir, and unless we understand the past, we will not understand the present. And I fully agree with his analysis of the Afghan nationalism and the situation that has evolved over the many years, and how Afghanistan with the historical problem of the Duran line. But I will not go to that detail and repeat that, and I will go to what happened in the recent modern history, and it will start it with two events. One is the friendship agreement between India and Afghanistan in 1950, which was the beginning of the solid relationship between India and Afghanistan at the modern time. And the second was a challenge. A challenge was that the creation of a state, whether you call it artificial state or a state, the Pakistan state after the partition, which was Afghanistan has become a sandwich between the two kind of rivalries with the two competing strategic outlook toward Afghanistan. From one side, we had the Indian strategic outlook toward Afghanistan, and that outlook looked like that a stable Afghanistan that is that is able to control its territory, and a strong, independent Afghanistan was seen as a strategic interest for India. And at the same time, it was also seen as a frontline kind of for the prevention of the spread of the terrorism in the recent and modern time, because that was how India was looking toward Afghanistan. And the second was the Pakistan strategic outlook toward Afghanistan, and that was in Afghanistan that is weak. That is, as General Ziaul had during the Jihad against the Soviet Union, he would say that Afghanistan should always boil. And that strategy is continued over many decades of the turbulence in Afghanistan. And I think if you recall from 1978 up to today, or even before that, during the President Dawood Khan time, Pakistan always supported armed opposition against a central government in Afghanistan. Every regime changes in Afghanistan, there was an element behind it, and they supported those elements, and they believe that by supporting those elements, they will suppress the Afghan nationalism, and they will support the groups that will eventually become a subordinate to Pakistan, but they never have succeeded them. They supported the Mujahideen, but once the Mujahideen came to power in Kabul, actually they have started to oppose that regime in Kabul as well. When they supported the Taliban, actually over many years, over the past 20 years, they supported the Taliban, and they believe that this is something that will realize the strategic depth in Afghanistan, and they have kind of violently supported the different military extremist groups against the regime in Afghanistan, despite of all the international efforts, despite of all Afghan efforts. Unfortunately, they were not convinced that they recognized a government in Afghanistan, but they, at the same time, they supported all these groups against the well-established, inclusive government in Afghanistan. And actually, that was, again, when they come back to power, the Taliban too, it is, again, it was a surprise for them that they will not subordinate to their ideas, and they will not surrender to the idea that they will recognize the zero line, they will recognize what they will say, but they will keep their will for an independent behavior of even if they had no experience in the government. Having said this, we are in a very complex situation in the current situation, because the complexity is also about the changing the position of the different countries in Afghanistan is used as a kind of a battleground for the conflicting interest of the different countries. And I think the role of the global power cannot be underestimated. At the same time, of the different regional actors, from China to Iran to Saudi to Pakistan to India, I think it is a very complex kind of theater for these shadow wars that is played on the ground of Afghanistan, and that is making more complex. And although many countries are realizing that a stable Afghanistan is in their interest, they're realizing that the spread of extremism and terrorism will not be in the interest of any country. And I think the Pakistan senior official recently is acknowledging that their policy of strategic depth was a wrong policy. They are acknowledging that the supporting of the Taliban, they call them their sons, they are whatever they call them, they are saying that that was a wrong policy and that is backlashing. And I think in the 2008, maybe everyone may remember that when TTP was established initially, I think that was established with the support of the ISI. It was not established by itself because it was a syndicate of the different groups. They mobilized them and organized them in a way that they can fight against the Afghan government, the Republic, and also the NATO forces in Afghanistan. The worry was that if Afghanistan become a strong progressive country, and Pakistan will be flanked between the two rival countries, India and Afghanistan. So that was basically their position. And I think that is a kind of a pity that every time a regime change in Afghanistan, Afghanistan is moving backward. Afghanistan is losing its vital human resources. The brain drain, and I think the collapse of an institution, the collapse of systems that take a long time when you rebuild them, when you make the state building. It is also creating a lot of differences. The suspicion that the division among the Afghans, that is one of the major kind of efforts that has been done by supporting the different proxy groups in Afghanistan. So I mean, when you look to all these different aspects and you look to the national interest of the countries, I think the countries who have sharing national interest will come together. It is a natural thing. Why, in many of my interaction with the Pakistani officials during the time when I was in the government, they were always asking that, why Afghanistan is so close to India? And I was reflecting back that the reason is because your approach is to destabilize Afghanistan, and India approach is to stabilize Afghanistan, and a stable Afghanistan is in their interest. So why we should be aligned with your strategy rather than to be aligned with the Indians' kind of a cooperation with India? This is how they created a big and deep suspicion among the Afghans. By every time a regime change happened, the people they feel that they are now their partners, their supporters, they supported them, they turned against them. Why? Because they feel that Afghanistan is the first priority for them. The national interest for every Afghan is a priority. And this is why they have failed. And I think this strategic depth is in a way going in a reverse order today, when there are violences spreading in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, and all these areas, and they, in order to blame somebody, so they blame Afghanistan for that, or they blame India for that. But at the same time, one of the issues that we should not forget is there is a paradox in the relationship or the current policies of India as well. And that paradox is basically about both in terms of security and in terms of the moral. Because India is a democratic country. There is respecting human rights. They are respecting women's rights. And I think the current policies of the Taliban, it is not sustainable. It is a nationalist. It is consolidated the country. It has removed a kind of different power bases, and they did a job for consolidation. But at the same time, such situation in Afghanistan, a monopoly that is not making an inclusive form of government, it is difficult to continue. So that is the biggest paradox that is existing. And I think isolating half of the population of the country from their very basic right to education, from their basic right for work, I think that is something it will not continue. It will be a kind of a seed for a new cycle, a renewed cycle of violence, and a renewed cycle of conflict. So I think that equation, in any policy that India take into consideration, they should take that kind of that paradox, which is a moral paradox. And the second is the security paradox. The security paradox is basically related to the spread of the network of the jihadi networks that is inspired by the return of Taliban into power, because that ideology will not be held in one place, and that have always the potential to change the flag, change the narrative, be in the hand of different spoilers, and for that reason, whether the operation of the ISKP, that is a real danger. There is the spread of a kind of a very the network of the madrasas, not the traditional madrasas, because the madrasas like the Deoband and others, they played a very constructive role in the history and in the independence movement and all these. But at the same time, the extremist ideology that is influenced the current madrasa, or the political Islam that is influencing the madrasa network and their curriculum, their ideology, and using that as the soil kind of network for education. I think there are many networks from outside of Afghanistan, apart from the Taliban, that are inspired and that will create a kind of a space for the flourishing of these violent extremist networks that will pose both security threat, not only for Afghanistan, but beyond Afghanistan. And I think a good strategy would be that, yes, Afghanistan always wanted to diversify its economic corridor, and to reduce its dependency on only on Pakistan for its connection to the ocean or to the ports. The investment on infrastructure that is made by India in Afghanistan that played a very significant role into diversification. During the Republic, some efforts which is currently also followed by establishing, for instance, the Chabahar link, also the link with Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, where that dependency should be gradually reduced to a degree that Afghanistan can have its balanced relationship with different countries and not be totally dependent on that route, which always Afghanistan suffered from that dependency because of the food or because of the trade or because of export of our product. So, I mean, those are good points, but none of them will be sustainable unless in Afghanistan we work for an inclusive governance that is based on constitution, where the rights of every citizen of Afghanistan, including the women, is ensured in that kind of a system. And that will require also is support for the, I think you are well aware of the assessment report that the UN has launched, and that was a kind of a solid report about the situation of Afghanistan, and they suggested a roadmap. And that roadmap included an inclusive dialogue between Afghans, because any solution that is kind of imposed on Afghanistan from outside, that is not sustainable, that is not working. But there is a need for a kind of a facilitation of that. And I think that facilitation or supporting of, if India is supporting that process of dialogue among the Afghans through the UN system, through the implementation of the 2721 resolution of the UN Security Council, that will be the benefit for not only for the Taliban opposition, but also for the Taliban. And I think we need that inclusivity. Every time one side of the Afghan society or the political kind of elite is outside the tent, then somebody will be supporting them to kind of, again, to create a space for the violence and conflict. And I think this time is not different than any other time. And that potential does exist. And the best way forward would be to continue the good relationship between the two countries. But at the same time, we have to distance ourselves from this day-to-day kind of emerging opportunity because of a situation or a conflict that we think that might be in boosting our relationship. And what is we seeing today in the past 48 hours, and I think when the Pakistan is announcing that this is an open war with Afghanistan, and I think from a claiming that we want to have a strategic dip to a situation with they announcing an open war. And I think that is a strategic kind of a mistake that Pakistan is making again, because Afghanistan is not that easy. That many power has came to Afghanistan and left Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is still in its place. We suffered a lot, but Afghanistan is not vanishing from the surface of the earth or on the map. So I think that has to be realized. And a stable Afghanistan will be in the interest of everybody. I will not go to further detail because I don't want to take too much of your time. And thank you very much again. And we hope that this dialogue can continue.
Thank you so much, sir, for your keynote address. Today we are also honored to have with us in audience Ambassador Amar Sinha, who is a former Indian ambassador to Afghanistan and Tajikistan and former member of the National Security Advisor Board. Sir, I request you to kindly share a few words for the inaugural session.
Rajas, there's an interesting intervention as we talk. I think Israel has just attacked Iran.
Okay, sir.
You might want to consider that. But I said I'd be here till 1 o'clock, so if you'll excuse me. Thank you very much, Masoom Saab. That was very, very, very instructive also, apart from being analytical and comprehensive, your remarks. Thank you for them. And I'm sure it will be taken into consideration by Delhi, should be. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and good to see Stanekzai Saab. I'm sorry that I joined late. For some reason, I had thought of a different time of start because I also missed, of course, my senior colleague and my former minister, Mr. M.G. Akbar's speech. But it was always nice to hear you. Of course, I don't know, they would not have planned to have this India-Afghanistan security dialogue with a foresight that what would be happening today would make it even more relevant than ever. And this has been an ongoing dialogue. Unfortunately, while there's a huge amount of goodwill and I would even say romanticism about India-Afghanistan relations, because of our long historical connections and friendship. And of course, the youngsters would forget that Afghanistan was India's immediate neighbor till the British decided to create Pakistan in between. And that is perhaps at the basis of this huge cultural overlap, the natural affinity for each other, and also tremendous dependence for trade and sustenance between the two countries. But let me come to today, unfortunately, Afghanistan now has seen what, 3 generations since actually the monarchy was disturbed in Afghanistan, which was a stable system which kept the nation together. You have seen that Afghanistan has been in turmoil of one sort or the other. And of course, rightly, it has been called the graveyard of empires, and, and a lesson that its most immediate neighbor hasn't taken from history and from its own recent history. And they have unfortunately attacked. And I was very intrigued that they had to use the word open war. Now, does that signify that they were actually already having a war which was secret or proxy? And this is the first time it is openly coming out in the open, because we know from Pakistan's history that they have been waging a proxy war against India for a long time. Now, perhaps this is also a confession. They are now doing it openly with Afghanistan. Pakistan finds itself in a very difficult predicament because the story doesn't begin in 2021 or 1996. Actually, it began much earlier with Mr. Ziaul Haq. And you see, after the Jihad, I think Ziaul Haq was telling Selig Harrison, the American scholar who has written on South Asia a lot, that, and I must quote him because it was very interesting. He told Selig Harrison that we, that means Pakistan, because of supporting the jihad against Soviets, we have earned the right to have a very friendly regime in Kabul with no influence of India or the Soviets. And of course, no claims to our territory. That means the Durand line should be accepted, basically it meant. He had also gloated this we were forming the real Islamic State, which was part of a pan-Islam revivalism that will one day win over the Muslims in the Soviet Union. These are verbatim quote of Ziaul Haq, the president, who actually in some ways changed the trajectory of Pakistan and its polity and also its military. So that is the mindset that they had seen. And this is what is very baffling, that today the main charge that Pakistan is making against Afghanistan is that you are harboring TTP, and along with India, you are sort of creating trouble in Pakistan, which is, and of course, we heard the same sort of accusations right through the Republic regime since 2001. But of course, that tune has continued even today. But the best is that they seem to be going against Zia's vision, because TTP perhaps is inspired by Zia's vision that they want to create an Islamic Ummah, and encouraged by what Pakistan has done in Afghanistan, they want to do exactly the same in their home country, that we should be an Islamic emirate first before we export our ideology outside. And that is the crux of the problem. But what has worried me, while of course some of the historical reasons for this dispute are long-standing and it's not going to go away, and definitely not through a war. But what is it that, what is important about this timing? Now, I could think of a few reasons that Pakistan perhaps was encouraged by the fact of what is happening around the world, where they have seen some stronger neighbors really literally hammering their smaller neighbors and getting away with it. So perhaps they thought that this is a time they could also do this. They have just recently joined the Board of Peace to resolve other issues, other conflicts. However, the actions tend to be anything but peaceful or finding a solution. And I say this because the attacks that you saw yesterday is only a continuation of what happened in October, when the Taliban foreign minister was in India in October. I think the first air attacks had happened. This is a major escalation. Border skirmishes happen, artillery fire happens, but using air force against the capital, etc., was not part of the playbook that Pakistan used to use there. I guess this is also an expression of their frustration at the inability to completely dictate their terms to Afghans, because they have also not understood this basic historical fact that any Afghan government of whatever ideology or shade of ideology cannot be seen to be subservient to Pakistan. This is one basic thing that they have not. Of course, I entirely agree with my friend Stanekzai Sahab when he said that the policy of trying to keep Afghanistan unstable and weak, they have partly succeeded because the society is today weak. Half of the Afghan society has been sort of pushed into complete oblivion, and this will have generational effect if it is not corrected in the right time. However, the political leverage that they wanted, or the defense and strategic leverage that they wanted, is not forthcoming. And that is, I think, the main cause of this frustration and this action against Afghanistan. But I think that while on paper, perhaps in terms of the air power, etc., the Afghan regime will not be able to match the Pakistan strength today, because let's not forget that Afghanistan actually in the 60s and 50s was the strongest air force in South Asia, even stronger than and more modern than India's air force, by the way. And this will come as a surprise to many. And that was the reason when the NATO was equipping and arming and training the Afghan forces, one of the main demands of the Pakistanis was that it should not be provided with air force or air support wing. And I think the NATO, etc., when they developed the Afghan air forces, they sort of took this demand of Pakistan in its sort of planning. And we are seeing the result that there is a certain imbalance. But however, Pakistan should know that there are other ways for symmetric warfare, and they would have to pay a huge price. And it's a real morass that they have stepped into. And it will only further complicate because now what Mr. Akbar said, that after this attack on Iran, I think the scenario will change drastically for the region. And then we are looking at a period of instability for the region. And so obviously it will be a thing of great concern to us. So I'll stop here and I'll go along as the discussions happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Sinha, for your valuable remarks. Your insights have really added a great depth to this dialogue. Today's addresses have offered us with valuable insights into the evolving situation in Afghanistan and its wider regional implications. Indic Researchers Forum mourns the passing of Major Maroof Raza, a distinguished defense analyst, patriot, and an unwavering voice for India's national security. His insightful contributions and dedicated service will continue to inspire us. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Audience, with this, we have come to end of the inaugural session. I would request all the members to stay connected for our upcoming sessions. Thank you.